Well, actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and a guest was talking about how things are going to go remote, or at least trend that way. And so, if you don't mind me going down that route, I have a sort of like maybe a hybrid view of what's going to happen. Yeah, I definitely think that some things are going to go remote, but I think what sometimes people forget, there's a big swath of the employment market that can't go remote. Transportation employees cannot go remote. Hospitality employees cannot go remote. And other industries, people who are involved in energy and power. So I think this notion that, everyone's going to be living in a house thousands of miles from their work, sitting in Maui on a beach and working for a company in Portland, I don't know how realistic that is long term. But having said that, yes, there are jobs that are definitely going to go remote. I get that. But also, I think in the height of the pandemic, it's all good and fine to say, oh, all my employees are working just as hard being at home. It's amazing. But we know that's not true. We already know that. And I think, yes, are there a certain percentage of employees that are like killing it and at home because now they have flexibility. But, for a lot of people who their job is just that, a job and not a career, for those people, I'm not sure long-term, working at home is going to work out. I think we're going to see some backlash in terms of productivity, building culture, collaborating. So yes, there will be some, but I don't think this is going to be as big as people think.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I'm excited because today is game day here at PYP. And if you have been a longtime listener, you know that means I have a fabulous guest who is going to take us on a leadership journey and bring us into his world. And let me tell you, his world is fascinating. His name is Jonathan Baktari. Jonathan, are you ready for kickoff?
I'm excited. Thank you, Mary Lou.
Yes, I am excited too. So team, here are some things that I know about Jonathan. First of all, when he was arguably at the peak of his medical career as a triple board certified physician, he saw an opportunity to try something new, taking everything he learned as a doctor, a medical director, and an educator. He launched two businesses, a vaccine clinic and a drug testing enterprise that are driven by technology and designed for fast, customer-centric service. Now, as those businesses grow, he's continuing to write his second chapter as a healthcare CEO. Dr. Baktari's company is E7 Health, and it was named the best technology company in the healthcare space in 2019. E7 Health could best be described as the Uber of preventive medicine, in that it is a systems company that has invested heavily in developing their own electronic cloud-based software to leverage technology for the benefit of their operation, patients, and clients. In addition to vaccines, antibody testing, and many other medical services essential to employers around the country, E7 is now providing at-home COVID-19 tests for individuals and companies all over the United States. Dr. Baktari has always believed that helping others was the ultimate achievement in life. And now, as a business leader and sought-after speaker, he's excited to share his expertise in tech entrepreneurship, the story behind COVID-19, preventative health, and many other topics with us today. So, Jonathan, wow, you've got an amazing background. And right out of the gate, please tell us your story about when you got the call to leadership and what is it like to play your current position?
Well, thank you, Mary Lou. My call came from really seeing the multiple angles in healthcare and not being frustrated, but just wondering if there was a different way to do it. I was a clinician, I was an educator, I was, worked for hospitals, insurance companies, health insurance companies. And when you look at the satellite view of healthcare, you can't help but scratch your head and say, is there a better way to deliver quality? And is there more efficient ways to deliver care? It just seemed like it had to. So the more I got an understanding of the big picture, the more you wanted to say, hey, we can do this better.
Yeah, we can do things better. I'm a firm believer in that. And the opportunity for you to marry basically your background in healthcare and being a clinical physician and also an educator and such. And then the tech side of things has opened up so many opportunities for delivering a better experience to patients. Ultimately, that's the end of the day, right? And in our pre-chat, we were talking about, what's happened over the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic, and you have an unbelievable position in the world of understanding what's going on. So could you talk about being a leader as a medical professional and also as a businessman during a pandemic with a disease that swept the world?
Yeah, Mary Lou, definitely. I call COVID-19, the pandemic or the virus of the century. I mean, you don't see this, every 5, 10, 20 years. So it is really a generational thing. I think many people will define this period in their lives like maybe our grandparents define, living through the Depression or living through World War II. It will be a defining moment because this has really impacted everyone. And it's impacted people where it really matters. I mean, this virus is really attacking the one thing that humans love to do and can't do without, which is to socialize. And if you really think about it that way, you could not imagine a more devastating virus when the sheer act that people love of hugging and hanging out and having dinner and having conferences. And so I think, I think it's going to be a generational defining moment.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen how it's impacted my children, my daughter is a young millennial, my son is an old Gen Zer, and their generation has definitely been impacted, but it's impacting everybody, of course. And I like that you use that terminology as a defining moment and also a disease of the century. I mean, hopefully we won't see something like this again, for maybe another 100 years. And as somebody who is an expert in vaccinations, in preventative medicine, what are some things that we and listeners can be thinking about as we move forward? How do we make the world better through our decisions? And can we prevent another pandemic through our choices, do you think?
Yeah, I actually just did a piece on this because, the whole idea is, let's not repeat our mistakes. Well, I think even besides preventing, I think we need to be better prepared. That would be number one, politically, financially, and all that. But I think the second one is look at the cause of most of the pandemics, even, the earlier ones with, SARS-1. And that is, a lot of it has to do with human contact with animal wildlife. And, with deforestation and people getting closer to true wildlife and, the animal trade and all of that, that really has to be addressed. We just need to have the political will to do that because, I think as we interact more and more with wildlife, these things, have a chance of occurring potentially again. So I think being better prepared, as we saw when this thing started, we didn't have masks, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. And luckily we had the mRNA technology, sort of sitting in the back. But aside from that, we really weren't prepared. So I think the combination of, deforestation, getting closer to wildlife trade, as well as being better prepared is probably the way to go.
Okay. So I'm hearing that, it comes down to small choices every day, as well as the sweeping, what our leaders of countries have to decide about, regulations and all there. It's complicated. It's complicated. There's just so many factors. So I'd like you to talk about what's challenging for you right now, being a leader, Jonathan. What keeps you up at night?
I think our biggest thing at E7 Health is, we're all about, getting the word out, education, and, during the height of the pandemic, how to be safe. And now as the vaccines have rolled out, our job is really education. How much good information can we get out there based on facts that will help people make the right decision for their own health? You can't force people to make this decision or that, but you can certainly give them all the facts.
So,
that's what we try to do.
Yeah, facts are important. I know I and many listeners have questions about how do we know that we are actually getting the facts in a media-driven world with different sides and different points of view, which is healthy, right? But we all know the proliferation of social media, and it's easy to spread misinformation. So how can listeners who want to make a sound educational decision know that what they're reading is information that perhaps is not 100% factual?
Yeah, that's because that's a challenge because you go on YouTube and Google COVID-19 vaccine, and you have all these experts just on YouTube, for example, who are chiropractors, and I'm taking nothing away from chiropractors and other people who've pivoted towards being COVID experts. So I get that, but I think really getting your information from people who do it for a living and not from people who just pivoted to being a COVID vaccine expert in the last 6 months. I think that's a good start. And also just, talking to your private doctor, who you have a relationship with and you trust, or other physicians in your life or clinicians that you trust. But yes, I think you have to filter out some of the noise. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. One of the most interesting things that I find is, you see all these people that are, and I think we talked about this earlier, who are anti-vaccine or don't believe this or don't believe that. One of the interesting things I tell people is there's no group of people that don't believe in antibiotics, right? Right? There's no Facebook group, arguing, hey, never take an antibiotic, right? But why is that? Why are there people who question potentially vaccines, but they don't question, like, hey, never take chemotherapy? There's no other class of drugs that, that there are people as a group that are against. So I think that in itself tells you something about why, like vaccines are unique and they're amenable to sort of all these theories and stuff. So I think just get the facts, just like you wouldn't reject antibiotics outright and say, I'm never taking an antibiotic. I think you have to look at, vaccines and stuff like preventive stuff like vaccine, we just look at the data and decide that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do your research, right? If you find a video on YouTube, consider the source. I guess that's, as a former English teacher, teaching people how to do research, that was one of the big issues, is you've got to consider the source. Who is this person and what might they be doing? I think it's interesting that you brought up this new class of, so to speak, experts. And it's not just with COVID-19. It's happened with anytime there's something that's going on, there's going to be people that want to jump into the pool and position themselves and being associated with whatever that may be. And
Right.
So, just again, double check is what I'm hearing you say. And that's really great advice. Who influences you, Jonathan, to be the best that you are? Do you have a coach? Do you work with a mentor? Who is your go-to person that shapes your decisions?
This is probably not the answer you're expecting, but I have to be very frank with you. Over my career, the people that have changed me the most and given me insight into what's important are really my patients. I can't tell you why,
Nice.
but sometimes, I'll be having a conversation with a patient and you have to look for it. Like a lot of times, when I was practicing ICU medicine, and I remember one time there was a elderly patient who wasn't doing well and wasn't going to do well, and I went over to his daughter to kind of give her the bad news that things weren't going to end well, and she started to cry, and she goes, you have no idea what a great man my dad was. And I think my normal instinct when I was much younger would have been, oh yes, I'm sure he was very great, blah blah blah, and then kind of move on. But I just, for whatever reason, it just struck me, and I said, you know what? Let's sit down. Why don't you tell me about your dad?
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh, I mean, when I sat there and I listened to these stories about what this man had done for his daughter, I mean, that you learn from your patients. If people say, what's the greatest side of being a physician? What's the upside? Is it your own boss, money, whatever? No, the greatest insight, the greatest advantage is that literally you'll meet someone and within 2 minutes, because they respect doctors so much, they'll tell you anything about themselves. And there's no other profession. A barber can't walk into someone and say, hey, tell me about your childhood or tell me about your dad. Or you're not going to open up to anybody like you open up to a clinician, literally instantly, hopefully. And especially if you have rapport, it's even more. So whether it's marital advice or any other advice, the best advice I've ever got were from my patients. If I give you one more anecdote, which I sort of live by, every time I had a patient who'd been married for more than 50, 60 years or whatever, I would always say, hey, tell me your secret, right? How do you stay married for 50, 60, 70 years, whatever? And, I heard all sorts of, never go to bed mad, never do this, never do that. But, like the one that stuck with me over the years was this one gentleman told me, he goes, the way to stay married forever is when you're wrong, you apologize. And when you're right, you shut up.
I love that. That is great advice.
Now, where are you going to get that kind of life coaching?
Seriously. Oh, that's terrific. Before I get on to the Move the Chains part of the show, Jonathan, I'm curious, what made you decide to become a doctor in the first place?
Yeah, I think, my dad was a physician, so,
okay.
But he never pressured me. It was just very subliminal. And I think there was this sort of, I don't want to say naive view I had as an 18-year-old that, doctors just help people and that's really much all they do. And that seemed alluring as an 18-year-old. You don't really think about, the business end of it and the headaches and filling out insurance forms. And you just have this, very noble vision that you're just there helping people all the time. And of course, being a physician is more than that. But, I think that was the lure, that was the hook that got me in.
Nice. And you, I can tell you still have that caring. You are, even with your company, E7 Health is all about helping people, through technology, making some of these processes more streamlined and less cumbersome.
Yeah, no, in fact, a lot of the technology where we spend a lot of money on are things that really aren't going to give us an ROI in terms of sales or whatever. But what we do is we try to figure out how can we reduce friction in the system for our clients, our patients. I think we've gotten 10,000 positive reviews in 3 years on our website.
Wow.
I don't think there's any company in the world that has 10,000 positive reviews. We are just starting out with just a couple locations, but part of that is they're writing reviews not about me or anything else. They just can't believe a system exists where there's minimal to no friction and they get what they want right away and explain to them and it's transparent. And they just can't believe it. I mean, that's, one of the things and when it comes to corporate clients, we rarely ever lose a corporate client because you think, just naturally you would lose clients because, I don't know, a new person comes in and they don't know us and they switch, whatever. But what's interesting is, at least with the clients we have now, there's nowhere for them to go. I mean, they can't go anywhere because they can't replicate what we do in terms of having minimal friction.
And so explain to listeners what a client of a user would experience. Like, first of all, why do they show up to your product, and what is it that they're getting?
Well, I mean, so we have, E7 stands for 7 books of business. So that becomes a little hard to just give you one example because think of us as like a food court, not like an Italian restaurant. We're like 7 restaurants. And when corporations or people come in, they'll go into multiple restaurants and use different a la carte services. So, but having said that, but let's just talk about employee health, which is one of our books of business, where we basically help corporations do their employee health services. People don't know that for many, many jobs, either through government regulation or for safety reasons, employees need to have medical care, whether it's, having their vision or hearing tested every year, getting vaccines, getting physicals, getting blood tests. Many, many jobs in the U.S. require that on a yearly basis. And right now, corporations farm that out to just random companies, urgent cares, and people who do it as sort of like a side hustle. And what we did is we took all those side hustles and we made it our main hustle.
I love how you describe things. Very interesting.
Right. So because we don't do urgent care, we don't do primary care. If you come to our office with a sore throat, we won't see you. We'll refer you, but we won't see you because we're so focused on, providing our clients, and our clients can be retail clients. So if you're starting medical school or nursing school and you need vaccines or a TB skin test or a physical or a drug test. So we have 50% of our clients are literally just average people who are, they're getting their citizenship and they need immigration physicals and vaccines, or they're starting a new job and they need an employee physical, or, they need laboratory work for anything, cosmetic surgery or whatever they need. We will provide it. But what's important is that we've literally taken away, for example, all the paperwork. You know how you go in the doctor's office, they give you that clipboard with 50 sheets?
Yes.
Whatever.
That.
We don't have any, you do all that at home on your desktop or your phone. When you book the appointment, you get a link to register. So when you come in, there's no paperwork. And if we have you sign anything, it's on an iPad. So there is no registration when you come see us. And literally, like, for example, some of the testing we do, if you have the test done in our office, by the time you get to your car to turn your car on, the results are in your patient portal. So there's no such thing as send me my medical records or I need a copy of that.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, everything we've ever done for a patient is in their portal. We don't actually even have a medical records department because there's no reason to keep people's records because it's in their portal.
Sure. Wow, you've really embraced the cloud, the way things are, and are pioneering this new model. That's exciting. Good for you guys. I love it.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Well, Jonathan, we're at the part of the show I call Move the Chains. And this is where you get to tell us about a time when you found yourself playing out of position, when things did not go according to that beautiful game plan you had all mapped out and you thought, this is it. And it turned out that you were metaphorically sacked. You got intercepted or you fumbled the ball. What caused this to happen? And then what was the lesson you learned from the experience?
Well, we don't have to go too far back. I think, in last March when literally our state shut down, and all businesses, all non-essential businesses shut down, and we live and die off corporate clients as well as retail clients, and so literally our everything just went poof.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not seeing sick people, we're managing companies, health divisions and their employee health, what have you. And so all of that kind of disappeared literally overnight, and like for many businesses. But I think it was just getting our senior team together, and we knew, luckily we were a COVID company before COVID existed. So we knew what COVID was because we were doing testing for other viruses and giving, we have in stock every vaccine available in the United States since 1994. So we knew what to do. Our business had just basically stopped, but we got the senior team and in a Zoom room, and we just kept hashing it out, which, what direction to go, what services to add, and what we need to do technology-wise. So one of the things that we did immediately, we got our software development team together, and we set up nationwide saliva testing, COVID-19 saliva testing, where corporations could test their employees. We would ship them saliva kits, and they could do it at work or at home. And then they'd FedEx it. We set up an account with FedEx, so we'd FedEx it there. They'd FedEx it back overnight, and we'd run the tests and upload the results to our portal. And we created company portals on the fly, literally. So many corporations started to use us for that service during the height of the pandemic, where I know we had some packaging plants that, had to close their whole factory, and to bring them back, they had to test everybody literally on the same day. And so we would send all these kits, and it was something we hadn't done before, but we had to reinvent and come up with solutions that our clients needed. And I think that was really challenging. I really give kudos to my staff, and our software development team, because it was, in retrospect, I didn't think it could have been done, but we somehow pulled it off. So it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there you were going along, and then I think for everybody, you said it perfectly, and then poof, business shut down, and life as we knew it completely stopped. And the world is constantly changing. You, as somebody who's has a front row seat to infectious diseases, to patterns of viruses and such, when you look into your crystal ball, Jonathan, what do you predict will have the greatest impact on how we show up to work in life over the next, say, 5 years?
Well, actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and a guest was talking about how things are going to go remote or at least trend that way. And so, I mean, if you don't mind me going down that route, I have a sort of like maybe a hybrid view of what's going to happen.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I definitely think that, some things are going to go remote, but I think what sometimes people forget, there's a big swath of the employment market that can't go remote. Transportation employees cannot go remote. Hospitality employees cannot go remote. And other industries, people who are involved in energy and power. And so I think this notion that, everyone's going to be living in a house, thousands of miles from their work and, sitting in Maui on a beach and working for a company in Portland, I don't know how realistic that is long term. But having said that, yes, there are jobs that are definitely going to go remote. I get that. But also, I think in the height of the pandemic, it's all good and fine to say, oh, all my employees are working just as hard being at home. It's amazing. But we know that's not true. We already know that. And I think, yes, are there a certain percentage of employees that are like killing it and at home because now they have flexibility. But, for a lot of people who their job is just that, a job and not a career, for those people, I'm not sure long-term, working at home is going to work out. I think we're going to see some backlash in terms of productivity, building culture, collaborating. So yes, there will be some, but I don't think this is going to be as big as people think. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there are some barriers, like I said, some you just have to be there. And I think when people really look at productivity, collaboration, creativity, I think some of these companies are going to have second thought. It's all good and fine when you have no choice to say, yes, we believe in remote working. But I wonder how much of that is going to bounce back.
I think you make some good points. And the remote for certain kinds of work is what the pandemic informed certain companies was, hey, we can have an entirely remote workforce because of the nature of that work. But you brought up a very good point that I think does get lost in the shuffle sometimes, which is, I mean, I think of my brother, for example. My brother builds houses. He owns a construction company.
He's not going to be working in Maui.
You're not building someone's house virtually.
Right.
You just, and to your point about transportation, I mean, people are flying and pilots. I have friends who are pilots and they've been flying throughout the pandemic. They have to. People are still going places. Yes, the mass amounts of people who were flying went way down, but we're starting to see that pick back up. And so I always am so curious what each person that I talk to, what you see as coming down the road. And
I mean, the one thing I do see coming down the road, which I think is great, is I think technology is going to intervene. Like when you go to a conference, I don't think there's going to be this massive line to pick up your badge anymore. I think there's going to be a system where you get a text or something to go get your badge from here. I think even we have season tickets for sporting events. I think the whole thing, 200 people standing in line to get a hot dog, I think that's going to go away. I think you're going to have to order it on an app and someone's going to bring it to you, or it's going to force things to happen. So I think that change is probably going to be permanent and ever expanding. I just don't think the concept of 40, 50 people standing in line to, do anything. I think people are going to have to really think hard before they ever go back to that. So hopefully that's good. And then the other funny thing is I think the handshake is probably, it's going to take a long time for that to come back as the way people greet each other. But I think, it's stuff like that I think will leave an imprint. And just like, like if you talk to your, grandmother who survived the Great Depression and, they can't see, you've heard the story, like, anyone who's survived the Great Depression, often they're like, well, I'm buying one car and driving it for 20 years and I'm going to drive it into the ground. As long as it's functioning, why should I buy a new car? So that was the mindset of people who survived the Depression, right? It impacted them long-term potentially. And I think the impact we're going to have for this generation is this whole concept of, hey, I'm a little leery about shaking hands. I'm leery about going to a buffet and using the same utensils that 1,000 people used in the past hour. I think potentially I could see a generational impact, just like the people who don't want to spend a lot of money who survived the Depression or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really feasible. I'm curious, how much longer will we need to be wearing masks, do you think? How long will that last?
Okay, well, you promised me we weren't going to talk about politics, but I'm joking. Did you promise me that?
I did, but I don't see that as politics.
Really? No, I'm kidding. Okay, no, seriously.
No, I know it is, but to me it's a physical requirement right now. I'm just curious.
Okay, well, this really goes to I think the better way to phrase that question, if you don't mind me helping rephrase that. But
yes, do.
When will we get to herd immunity? Because I think
good question. Yes,
I think isn't that's sort of like a roundabout way to ask your question, right? Because people are going to make the argument, rightfully so, that we should wear masks till we get to herd immunity, right?
Right.
So the question really is, when will we get to herd immunity? And this involves mathematics. So last I checked, over 30 million Americans out of 330 have documented COVID infection, right? Meaning they actually took a swab and they were positive, right, in the United States. So, and we know that there is a multiple of that never got the test but got the disease.
Okay.
Most experts think the multiple is, let's be conservative, 2 to 4 times the number of people that got it. So 30 million people got COVID infection documented. And let's say we multiply that by 3 even, which is very conservative. That means at least 120 million Americans, probably closer to 150 million, already got COVID.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. That's almost 40% of the population. If we believe that. If we think 40% of the population already got COVID, 30, 40, 50, and we need to get to 80% to get herd immunity, then all we need to do is vaccinate another, 100, 150 million people. And theoretically, if we vaccinate 100 million to 150 million people who never got COVID, then you're looking at, approaching 78, 80% of the population as having some sort of immunity.
Mm-hmm.
In which case we get, but, Mary Lou, the reason why I really can't answer your question is even if all those numbers are correct, there's 2 curveballs that could happen that could set us back. So if you believe the math, you would think by summertime or certainly end of summer, we should be at herd immunity.
What are the curveballs? I have to ask.
Well, there's 2 curveballs. Okay, one curveball is how long will this immunity that you got from the vaccine or from the infection last?
Yes.
Now, for a lot of viruses like measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, the vaccines you give your children, they get a series, and then they're done for life. They're protected for life. Even if they get exposed to the measles virus 40 years later, the vaccine's still working. Okay, so that's one class. But some vaccines peter out, like the flu vaccine. It peters out by the next year. So the question is, one, the immunity you got from getting infected, how long will that last? When can you get reinfected? And for the people who got the vaccines, how long will the immunity from the vaccines last? Will it be like measles and last for a lifetime? Or will it be like influenza and you have to get it every year? Those are forks in the road. So those are the 2 curveballs. So if those curveballs don't happen, I say we're at herd immunity, sometime this summer. And then, the other thing is, again, if a new variant comes out that's not covered by the vaccines, or the immunity peters out from the vaccines, we could be back to not square one, but we could be doing this for much longer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. So for people who perhaps got COVID and recovered, I have friends that's true of, and I think I had it. I think I had it very early and I didn't know what it was because we just didn't really know. I have no proof of that, but when I look back and I think of the timeline, I'm pretty sure. And I know you're not here to diagnose anybody, but in general, from a medical perspective, do we know if you did get it, recovered, and are there antibodies in the system? Did the immune system, which is what we all have in our bodies, do its work, or is it still too early to tell?
Well, it did its work, and you are protected against that original strain at least for 6 months.
Okay,
but that may peter out,
yes.
or as we're seeing in South Africa, a new strain may come out. Not a strain. I'm sorry. A new variant may come out that's so different that you can get reinfected.
Yeah. Okay. There's just a lot of unknowns.
Right. Well,
it's day by day.
We're gonna know in the next 3-4 months, I think, because we're gonna find out eventually if the immunity is lifelong. Because whether you again, let's take hepatitis A, let's take hepatitis B, let's take measles. Either way, if you get the vaccine or get the disease, you don't get reinfected. Right. So if COVID turns out to be like that, if the SARS-CoV-2 virus turns out to be like that, then we're good.
Yeah. Well, again, we've got this waiting period to see, and I'm gonna imagine a positive outcome because that's what I want. That's what I want to see for the world.
Yeah, but just all things considered, I'm betting with you because I'm betting that the vaccines are going to be really effective. I'm hoping for a very long time.
Yeah.
And even if we have to get a booster in a couple of years or whatever, I think that should be good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, time will tell, but we were talking about this in the pre-chat. I'm a critical thinker. And when I look at history and we look at, previous pandemics in history that have been recorded and the knowledge that we have from that, and obviously everyone is different, but history does have a tendency to repeat itself, and we will come out of this. I'm an optimist by nature, and there's a lot of smart people, including yourself, who are on the forefront of what we're doing. And that's what we need. That's what leadership is saying, hey, we can find solutions, and we're going to. Yeah.
And my optimism, and I think we talked about this earlier, is some of the new technology that has come out of all this is really going to even revolutionize the fight, even if it continues, like the mRNA vaccine technology. That's revolutionary, and literally they can create a new vaccine for a new strain in 48 hours. I mean, that's how good that technology is.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So that in and of itself is a touchdown, but I would like to have you experience touchdown here at PYP, Jonathan. So I'm putting you in the red zone. There are less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You're down by 4 points. It's third down, and it is now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you metaphorically got that ball into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah. Well, I think when we were, again, going back to the COVID thing, I think when we got a slew of requests from all our clients about what they needed, and they needed it fast, I really thought, like I was saying earlier, we couldn't do it. I just thought it was just too Herculean task to put all of this technology together to save these companies and allow them to move forward, with their businesses in the middle of a pandemic. And, we stayed up nights and weekends, and we literally had the whole team just, banging their heads with each other and trying to put together. And I remember, doing this in April, May, and then finally in, end of May, we really came up with a solution. But it was really touch and go. And I didn't, there were many nights I thought, well, this is not even going to work. There's too many moving parts, too many requests. But I'm really lucky to have such an amazing team that got it together. So, yeah, I think surviving and servicing and helping our clients during the pandemic the way my staff did was our real major touchdown.
I love it. And as we wind things down today, could you share with us 1 to 3 key offensive strategies straight out of your leadership playbook that listeners could implement right away to see some forward progress in their work and or their life?
Well, I think it's one of the things we do in our corporate culture is that, first of all, we only hire people who want a career. We don't have any jobs. So we try, I think to give you advice is hire people who want to really, they want to grow a career. They want to, make a difference. And then, find people that, I think really care about the clients and the people they're serving, and not necessarily about making money for the company. One of the adages I always tell anyone I'm working with, it just happens great quality care is the best medicine and is the best business. So if you really want to have a thriving business, try to help your clients. Put yourself in their shoes. Surprisingly, if you just look out for their best interests, most of the time that turns out to be amazing business, coincidentally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to tell people you don't have to come up with what's going to necessarily make us money. Of course, on some level you do, but why not try to figure out how you can solve people's problems? And you'll be surprised, at least we've been surprised, how often that translates into good business, and not think of what's good business necessarily at the beginning of it, if that makes sense. And lastly, take care of the people you work with. they're your family. They're, no company is bigger than the staff they have. And they're all owners and they're all part of it. And you have to let them know that, not micromanage them, and let them, be their best. It's all of the above that I have found, kind of gets you to the last few yards, if I can use that analogy.
Of course. Love it. Great tips. Great tips. Serving others, showing up with that servant leadership mindset is a win-win for everybody. You just can't go wrong.
Yeah, coincidentally, right? It's just coincidentally caring is good business.
I know. Seriously. Well, for people who'd like to learn more about you, Jonathan, and also see some of your press clippings, you've got some great videos on your website. Where do you hang out online?
Yeah, people can go to jonathanbaktarimd.com. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to E7 Health. And soon we're going to be launching a YouTube channel and a podcast where we talk about the underbelly of the healthcare world. So that's coming out soon. But yeah, that'll be all on jonathanbaktarimd.com. And you can subscribe just to get our newsletters, just information. But you can also subscribe to that, and we'll send you out updates as things come. And most of the stuff we do is just educational. Mm-hmm. We don't really sell anything. We just provide education.
Yeah, and that's fabulous. So, team, that the link to his website will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And you heard him today talk intelligently and compassionately about what we've all been through the last 15 months now as of this recording, and the multiple challenges that something none of us asked for, but certainly showed up on our doorstep, and we've had to rise to the occasion. And, I think you've given us, Jonathan, some really excellent tips and stories that illustrate positivity and future forward, and we can solve a problem that at one point, I know for myself and many people I know, we had days when we thought, is this ever going to end? Our conversation today really is shining some light at the end of this tunnel. And I want to thank you for that. And before we say goodbye, you said you have season tickets to a team. So who is your team, Jonathan?
We have season tickets for the Golden Knights and the Las Vegas Raiders now.
Woo! Marcus Mariota is my man. I keep waiting for him to become the starting quarterback again.
It's all a matter of time.
I know.
Yeah, so when you're out our way, let us know. You'll be our guest.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, my partner is a huge fan of Vegas, and we love football. So that is a generous offer. And you are fabulous. Thank you for being a great guest today, Jonathan, and for shedding some light on a tough topic. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Mary Lou. It was an honor.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use hashtag PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.